The Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Russell Glasser.
Hi, folks.
We are live. It is Super Bowl Sunday, I guess.
Yeah, Sunday. Is the game going on right now?
No. It's after the show. So this is the Super Bowl pre-game show.
Yeah.
It's February 3rd, 2008. We'll have the number up for you shortly to call in. And you can, give your predictions. Who are you praying for? Because we know both teams are praying for themselves. So, if we can kind of get like a little analysis of who's praying for whom, we'll maybe be able to come to some conclusions about who God likes better. But I want to welcome everybody. We are, in fact, a live public access television program sponsored by the Atheist community of Austin. We give the atheists in the Austin area the chance to interact with the public, answer questions, correct misperceptions, have discussions about relevant topics to church-state separation, and allows the public to call in and talk to us, ask us questions, find out more about atheists and atheism, or to explain what they believe, why they believe it, and why they think anybody else should. The Atheist Community of Austin is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road beginning at around 11:30. Except for the first Sunday of the month when we host a lecture series at the Austin History Center located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. Today was the first Sunday of the month and we had a lecture. Dickie Gregg, an attorney representing some of the Guantanamo detainees, came in to talk and give a lecture called Guantanamo. It's not about them, it's about us, and focusing on basically how we've tossed the Geneva Convention out the window and violated people's rights, and we're holding people who've never been charged with anything and aren't allowed to have attorneys, and we've chucked out every, legal protection that anybody should be entitled to. And it was good. He gave some accounts of his personal experience with one of the detainees who, thankfully, is now home. So that was the good thing that came out of today's discussion. The bad things, of course, were that we've basically turned our back on the legal system and the rights that all individuals should expect under that system. And, I'm not going to toss around words like treason, but it seems that certain members of the administration basically said, you know what, if we just decide to ignore the Geneva Convention, then they can't prosecute us for war crimes and we can do whatever the hell we want.
So what are you saying, that that's a bad thing?
I think I'm saying that that's a bad thing.
Okay, just
maybe I'm just not for the troops. But yeah, there was a lot of really good information in the talk today. There may be an audio version of this posted at the website eventually. I'm not positive. We don't always do that. But I definitely wanted to thank him for coming down and talking to us today. Very informative, slightly depressing, but there were some optimistic things that came out of it as well. In addition to the lecture series and this program, which is available as a podcast, an audio podcast, a video podcast, and for download at Google Video, the ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. That's PROPHETS, and for more information you can go to that website, nonprofitsradio.com. We were live yesterday. It's hosted by Dennis LeBay, features myself, Russell Glasser, and Schilling, and we'll be live again in 2 weeks, which I think is the 16th, I believe. But there's more information at the website. You can download that podcast as well. In addition to the various media outreach programs the ACA participates in, we also have a number of events throughout the week, including some social events like Atheist Happy Hour, which is every Thursday, beginning at around 7 o'clock and lasting until everybody's sober and safe to drive home. You can come down, feel free to join us there for a meal, a drink, conversation, whatever you like. All of our events are open to the public. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to attend. If you're coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, please don't. We'll have the number up for you just as soon as the announcements are over. You can call in. We can talk about any number of things. Russell's going to talk a little bit about growing up atheist, I guess.
That's right.
And but if you want to come in, call in and talk about, I don't care, Patriots versus Giants, which to me, I look at this as kind of, the Patriots are those of us who are standing up for the First Amendment, and the Giants are the deep pockets of the religious fundamentalists who are trying to destroy the First Amendment. And much like the game today, I think it'd take a miracle for the Giants to succeed. And I'll while I'm not a fan of the football Patriots, I'm a fan of the regular Patriots, those people who are actually in favor of church-state separation and the rights guaranteed by the First Amendment.
I think you're more optimistic than I am, because I'm always worried about the deep-pocketed religious giants taking over from the... I got distracted.
You got distracted. we have guests in the studio like always, and
Yeah,
I told
okay.
you I took it right underneath the camera.
This is
It's
an
good.
experiment today.
It's not a problem. I think we saw like the top
See,
of the head.
I figured that there was not going to be anybody watching anyway, so, with the football game going
And now,
on.
he's ignoring the thousands and thousands of people who are downloading this every week or so. As mentioned, we're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, nonprofit educational organization. In addition to the lectures and weekly meetings, the ACA has a number of websites devoted to discussion. Some of them are actual ACA websites. We have a number of Yahoo message boards and email lists that people can participate on. Some of them are actually operated by ACA members, and the Atheist Experience blog run by Martin Wagner, where Russell also contributes, as does Tracy and some others. And I once did, but I'm just swamped and can't. But atheistexperience.blogspot.com, also ironchariots.org, which Russell and I actually started in conjunction with some fans of the nonprofit show to focus on counter-apologetics, and there's a forum over there that's devoted to both the shows. And every week after the show, we get together and go to dinner. We're currently going to El Arroyo on 5th Street at Campbell. I guess I'll put the address up on the screen. The show runs till 4:30. We'll be down there around 5 o'clock. Anybody is welcome to come down and join us. We're there from around 5 to 7. I can't guarantee that the Super Bowl will be on the screen down there, but it's likely. So if you're interested in watching and visiting with some godless heathens, feel free to come on down and join us. And finally, as a last call out to ACA members, if there are things that you'd like to participate in the ACA, newsletter contributions or suggestions for various activities and things to do, you can email any number of email addresses, president at Atheist-Community or editor for the newsletter. For those of you who don't get through on the telephones today, or don't want to, you can email tv at atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-hosts, all the people behind the scenes, or most of them. We can't promise to respond to every email, but we do read all of them and try and incorporate feedback and criticisms into the show. One of the things that we changed last week was, instead of using the lapel mics, we switched to boom mics. And there were no...
Oh, I thought I was the first guinea pig now.
No. We did this last week. And there were a number of people who commented that, there was excessive paper rustling. And, of course, the boom mics pick up every cough, whereas normally, I'd cover mic. We've made some minor adjustments, so...
Really? Because when I listen to shows that I've been on, I hear tons of throat clearing from me and little... when I chuckle.
But you're just hypersensitive.
So, yeah.
So we're going to try and avoid paper rustling as much as possible. Please feel free to let us know if the audio is an improvement over last week, or if it's worse, or if we need to switch back to lapel mics, anything like that. Whatever makes it easiest for people to hear. So.
Okay.
We got the number up. Feel free to call in if you have questions or if you want to discuss something. Also, I want to mention the ACA website as a frequently asked questions page, where we focus on the commonly asked questions about what do atheists believe, what don't they believe. Isn't your life just miserable if you don't have this belief that you're going to live forever? Those questions are answered there, mostly so that we don't have to answer them 2 or 3 times a show. I'm usually happy to answer any question that comes in at least once. So, but figure you can go ahead and start talking about growing up atheist.
Okay. I was hesitant to use this topic today. In fact, this is by request, I want you to know, because I talked about being an atheist parent one time before on the show, and I got email recently saying that we'd like to hear what it's like to actually grow up as an atheist, which I guess makes me reflect that my experiences aren't all that typical. I mean, I guess your experiences aren't all that typical either, because you were actually studying to be a minister, as you remind us frequently. But I guess, most people don't grow up atheist. They grow up under some kind of religion and have some kind of getting away story.
Yeah.
And I don't have that, which is why I've always thought my kind of story is boring. So that's why I didn't really want to couldn't really decide whether to bring this up or not. I mean, I like hearing the stories about how people had their own religious upbringing and how they figured out that it wasn't true. I mean, that seems like kind of an interesting mental change. That's the kind of thing that great dramas are made of. Whereas me, I was raised by two atheist parents, and not only atheist, but Jewish atheist, and not only Jewish atheist, but in many cases loud-mouthed, outspoken atheists. And I guess that's a pretty different experience than most people have. And I guess one of the ways that this crops up is that people ask, well, how could you possibly be moral or feel that your life has any meaning when you're an atheist? And I'm not sure I can explain how, but I can definitely point out I never, growing up atheist, particularly felt like that was a problem, Anyway, my parents are both scientists. I was born in Princeton, New Jersey, and I kind of always assumed that both of them were atheists, although later in life I've discovered that my mother is sort of a generic theist, new agey type person, and my sister has been sending me photographs recently, and I found out that my parents were great big hippies also. At least that's what they look like in the pictures. But they both have physics degrees. They're both very intelligent and rational people. And above all, I'd say that my atheism was influenced more by my father than by my mother. My father actually comes from a long line of atheists. As far as I know, my great-grandfather, who I never met, was himself an atheist, and according to family history, when he died, most people are on their deathbed reading the Bible and trying to get a last-minute cram session in, right? He was supposedly reading Bertrand Russell. You'll notice my name is Russell, and that's not an accident. I don't think it's related to what my great-grandfather was reading, but my father was always very enthusiastic about Bertrand Russell. I've gone back and read a lot of his stuff, and I thought, yep, good choice for a name.
Did you thank him for not naming you Bertrand?
Yes, I appreciate that. Or Bert. I don't think I would have liked to be Bert.
Hey, it's Bert Glasser.
Right.
Yeah, Bert Glasser.
Speaking of long generations of atheists, if you hear noises in the studio today, it's because my 5-year-old son is here for the first time. Ben is here. I asked him to be quiet, but he's 5, and that's okay. Hey, Ben.
Say hi, Ben.
Hi.
You probably
Hi.
can't pick him up because these are directional microphones. But anyway, like I said, this is an experiment today to see if he's cool with being in the studio. And so far, pretty good, except for walking under the camera. Let's see, where was I?
You were talking about how you got named.
Right. Let's see. So I never, and also Ben, we never grew up learning that there was any kind of God. And I didn't realize that this would be a problem for people later in life. I guess I should go into my mother a little bit because she's the part from which I get the actual Jewish identity. I mean, my father is nominally Jewish, and people are always confused when I say I'm a Jewish atheist. Jewish is as much sort of a legacy or even sort of a racial trait as it is a religion. And some Jews take it more seriously than others. My mother's side of the family takes Judaism pretty seriously, and my mother tried to get me involved in a lot of that stuff. We had, for a while, Sabbath dinners where we would light candles and break bread and drink wine and grape juice, depending on your age. And I went through the process of getting bar mitzvahed, went to temple a lot, went to a Jewish summer camp. And so and yet it didn't really work. I mean, I got older, tried to hold on to my Jewish identity, but you'll often hear me say, I'm a bad Jew. I read about Jewish culture stuff somewhat, but I don't still go to temple. I tried a couple of times, and I find that, they just talk about God too much. So, sorry, Mom. Anyway, I was about 5 when we moved to the heart of the Bible Belt. I lived in Auburn, Alabama from the ages of 5 to 10, and you'll notice that's great timing because that's just when kids enter kindergarten and start to interact with other kids more and learn that, there's a little bit of a problem when you say there's no God. My dad actually warned me about this. He said, look, you're going to start going to school. I mean, I was 5. I don't really remember this conversation that well, but he tells me, he said you should be careful of telling people that you don't think there's a God. And I didn't listen to him. I mean, I guess I did for a while, but I did wind up blabbing that I was an atheist, and people would ask, what does that mean? And I said, I don't believe in God. And so it's weird. I think my parents were worried that I was going to get beaten up, but I didn't. I mean, you have to understand, and maybe a lot of you theists watching will relate to this, when you see an atheist for the first time or you hear what an atheist is, you say something like, there is no God? What does that mean? I don't understand. I mean, it's like saying your father doesn't exist, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that's kind of close.
Right. I mean, it's like denying something that you've assumed and been told is true from the earliest days of your life. And certainly that was the case with some of the kids that I went to school with. I don't remember a lot about being a kindergarten atheist, but I do remember that there was a while when we'd be at the in the front of the school. We go there every day waiting for our parents to pick us up, and some kids would come over, and one kid goes, watch this, do you believe in God? And I'd say, no. He said, yeah, check that out. Isn't that weird? That was the reaction I got as a young atheist.
So they weren't, ready to string you up or anything? Because, I think that's common among 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
Actually, we have a caller on the line, and this is kind of related to school, so it'll help us kind of remember where we are.
Okay, sure.
But it's something that I think you'll probably want to comment on as well. So.
Right.
And since we may be light on callers, is it Joe?
Yeah.
How you doing, Joe?
We'd like to
Good.
desperately cling to every caller we get today.
We love you, Joe.
I'd like to have either one of you discuss the particular college, I believe, that is seeking accreditation for their science course in creationism.
Yeah, the Institute for Creation Research. It's not really accreditation. They've requested certification to present master's degrees. Essentially, is what they're asking for. So it's not the same as accreditation, but
How is it different from accreditation? Because my understanding is you can say you've got an you've got a master's degree and it comes from the Texas system in some way.
But because that would be a university that has received accreditation. This is a special exemption which they have to renew every 2 years. Mm-hmm. And they will, if they're approved, I'm sure they'll continue to renew it every 2 years. We actually talked about this with the Texas Citizens for Science. CFI put together a discussion, and I was there, and some other ACA folks, some other CFI folks were there to talk about this. There's a lot going on. You've got the firing of Chris Comer, essentially. You've got a Board of Education of 15, where 7 of them are creationists and or young Earth creationists who are actively opposed to teaching evolution in school without also including creationism. You've got the Texas science standards that are currently up for review, and I think we'll hear more about that as we get closer to November. And now you've got the Institute for Creation Research, which tried to get accreditation in California and in other places and failed, and now they've come to Texas. and what they're seeking is approval from I've forgotten the name of the organization, but the legislature has set up a body that investigates and recommends whether or not schools should be accredited. And ICR is not seeking actual accreditation. They're seeking approval of this organization to allow them to grant master's degrees, essentially. It ends up working out kind of the same. And what part of the thing is, I'd be happy with them granting master's degrees in creation studies. I have no objection to that any more than I'd have an objection to biblical studies or anything else. What they're talking about, though, is they're offering a master's degree in science studies, and they're wanting to specifically label it, and I don't have the pages in front of me with what they're looking at. They want to label it in such a way that it appears to be a legitimate degree from a legitimate accredited university. Their purpose is to get these people in who are fundamentalist Christians. The ICR has really specific doctrinal requirements for students, right down to what their views are on the age of the earth and homosexuality as an abomination. These are things that the students have to make a profession of in order to be a student there. And then they're going to offer them a degree in science. And by the way, I hear an echo. And specifically tailored so that these people can then be qualified to go and teach in public schools. And I think that's what we're really talking about. This is kind of a way to pull an end around on the system and get more creationist friendly teachers into the school system.
Right, and I've actually mentioned before that this is kind of a common tactic that creationists are using these days, which is that if they can't get taken seriously within the system, then they'll create their own system and claim that it's just as legitimate. Like, they're a common criticism of creationism is that there aren't any peer-reviewed articles in scientific journals, so they made their own journalism journal called Ex Nihilo, I think, or Creation Ex Nihilo, or something like that. And in it, they publish their own articles and they review each other's work. And any time that you see a new creationist book coming out, you'll always see the usual gang of suspects: Michael Behe, William Dembski, those guys. Praising the book in the blurb. So it's like, they've created their own sort of shadow academic respectability on their own.
Can I comment?
Sure.
Well, having been raised a Catholic and having seen the inherent corruption in all of it, it's a little brainwashing.
Okay.
And that's about all I have to ask.
Okay.
All right.
Because it's all so much voodoo to me.
Well, I think, and we'll go ahead and let you go now and get back to what Russell was talking about, because I think it ties in. Thanks a lot, Joe. I appreciate the call.
Sure.
I think it actually ties in when he's talking about brainwashing at a young age. One of the reasons this question has come up is because there's a concern about whether or not people are indoctrinating their kids into their own religious beliefs, and is this something that actually happened to you?
I don't think so. I mean,
But how
as
could you
far
know?
as far as I can tell, I mean, I would have to say it's certainly true that my parents were atheists and probably told me that there was no God. And look at me, here I am, not believing in God today.
Right.
So, in that sense, you could say that this is indoctrination. But on the other hand, any kind of specific indoctrination I might have gotten from my parents, I think, was deliberately diluted in a whole bunch of ways. Or, some of it deliberately and some of it not so deliberately. Christians will often come at us and say that we just have a religious faith just like theirs. We have a faith that there's no God, and they have a faith that there is God, and so they're on equal footing. And that's an easy kind of symmetry to draw, but I don't feel like I was ever raised in the same environment where I get sent to some place and get told the same thing over and over again. I mean, it's not like when you're an atheist, you can restrict yourself to having just atheist friends, although I guess the atheist community of Austin is one way of getting toward that. But
Although, I don't set that restriction on myself.
No, I mean,
and as a matter of fact,
right.
As much as I enjoy doing things with the ACA and participate, as much as I can, I have plenty of friends around the town who follow all kinds of religious beliefs. And the good thing is that many of them are genuine friends. We get along. We agree on some things. We disagree on some other things. We laugh about some of the things that we disagree about, and we generally have fun. But this isn't. I don't go after them and try and take away their religion. We don't tend to have arguments and discussions about religion, and for the most part,
I argue with people who are religious, but only if it comes up in conversation. I mean, for instance, I actually want to bring up my best friend for a second, which isn't something I thought of when I was preparing for the show today. But when I was 10, I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and met a kid my own age just when I was driving up. He was right there next door. Shout out, hey Gil. I don't think he listens to the show. But his parents found out that I was an atheist, and they didn't want him to play with me for a while. And he did anyway. But I don't remember having serious discussions with him about atheism until just a couple of years ago. And it turns out that even though he is good friends with both me and my dad, who's the most outspoken atheist ever, I think we had small conversations about it, but he said that he was having a sort of a crisis of faith recently, and I didn't shy away from needling him about it, saying, well, here's what I think. And I think he's moved more away from belief. But I want to say that I didn't corrupt him the way his parents were afraid I would when we were kids. In fact, when we were kids, he actually egged me on to shoplift something. And I'll own up to it right now. I pocketed some gum, and I felt terrible about it, and that's the only shoplifting I've done in my life. And it was because of my Catholic friend. So, hey again, he's grown up into a fine, upstanding citizen. But yeah, I would have to say that you do get a lot of paranoia about what the atheist is going to do. A lot of assumption that they're going to indoctrinate you into whatever weird, crazy atheist beliefs you have, which is kind of a natural assumption considering that's what they would do.
Well, I think in part people will complain, well, it's wrong to put that off on their religion, and I agree. Mm-hmm. Let's say the shoplifting incident had nothing at all to do with who was Catholic.
I'm not blaming it on his Catholicism.
And that's the point I'm getting to, is that instead there is a comment to be made about these people who have deluded themselves into thinking that a particular religious belief is likely to make you more moral or more ethical. The fact of the matter is that by and large, whatever your religious belief is, kids tend to do a lot of the same stuff everywhere. And that includes, breaking stuff, lying, being mean to the other kids, shoplifting, and eventually, as they get into their teens, owning up to their hormones and having sex. Where the problem that I think with religion comes in is in how it chooses to deal with those things. First of all, there's some denial going on. I'm sorry, but if you happen to think that, for example, stripping is immoral, or doing adult films is immoral, then I wonder why so many of the girls that I've seen have crosses on their neck. Don't blame all of the problems in the world on people who don't believe, or a lack of morality that's caused by disbelief. The fact is that people are generally moral and immoral at the same rates across the board. And if anything, and I don't claim this as a guaranteed fact, but if anything, there's an impetus for atheists to be more morally correct in some ways. Now, I disregard the notion of sin, and I don't for a moment feel guilty about my thoughts, that thoughts could possibly be a crime, or that I could offend some creator of the universe by doubting him or thinking that, perhaps he doesn't exist. I also disregard a lot of other things that different religions say are sins, and I tend to look at it as, what do you do that harms other people, as being the main thing.
Right.
But even within the scope of a kind of Christian-based society and the morals that we do there, I think you'll find that there's been some discussion about whether or not atheists are underrepresented in prison. I don't find those statistics particularly fair. But what I will say is, this is something Chris and I talked about the other day.
Yeah.
That there's a good reason for atheists to actually be more moral. For example, I tend not to flip people off going down the highway when they've cut me off and pissed me off, because I'm an actual driving advertisement for atheism. So I take extra steps to try and make sure that I'm the best representative I can be.
Well,
when
Christians would probably say the same thing. They have to show the faith is. I mean, they have to. Oh, I don't know the lingo, but they say something just like that, where they want to be good representatives of the faith.
And I think that in general, most of them probably do. But what we're really saying in both cases is that we are actively working against our own nature in order to represent ourselves in a positive way to other people. What I think we need to start recognizing is, what exactly is our nature? When should we work in opposition to it? When should we embrace it and finally say, you know what, that's not a bad thing. They're not actually hurting anybody. And we see this quite a bit. I guess we can go ahead and take this call, which...
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple more things to say about morality, but again, callers...
This may actually tie into it. Is it Richard?
Yes.
How you doing, Richard?
Hi.
Hi, fine. My question is, religious people have always quoted the Bible and said, homosexuality has gone against God, and they quote Leviticus and all that other nonsense. My question to you is, what atheists that you've encountered who are homophobic, what is their rationale for being homophobic?
Do you know any?
I think I may know one atheist who's a bit homophobic, and I don't know that there's any rationale for it at all. I actually, this is an issue where I came a long way, coming from a background where I used to believe that this is an abomination. God said so. I think kind of playing off of what I mentioned earlier, talking about our own natural reactions. I've been, for years now, an advocate of equal rights for everybody, regardless of sexual orientation, etc. But for a while, there was the ick factor, and it was a double standard too, where if you see like two females kissing, it's fine, and if I saw two guys kissing, it was like, ooh. Well,
and I mean, I have to be honest. I haven't ever completely gotten over the ick factor, although I don't.
Right, and I don't
make an issue of it.
I don't necessarily think that I have either. It's not a matter of getting over that. It's a matter of embracing it, of saying, oh, now I understand why I had that reaction, and it's because, speaking simply, I'm wired differently. That is not something that has an interest in me, but it's not something that neither do I hold it against anybody.
Right.
But I actually have a greater appreciation for homosexual relations now than I ever did before. One of the things that came out this week, New York State Appeals Court ruled that the state of New York has to recognize same-sex marriages that originated elsewhere. And this is something you're going to see everywhere, because the states basically have laws on the books that say if a couple got married in another state and they moved to your state, you have to recognize that marriage. That you can't penalize them for moving to your state by taking away their rights. So, of course, Massachusetts allowed it. The couple in question actually got married in Canada. But you're going to start seeing this a lot more, and I'm hoping that it kind of makes these issues go away, because recognizing that my reaction, which used to be an ick and which is now a, hey, that's just not for me, is not any different from anybody else's reactions to these things. It's all in how we deal with it, how we choose to handle what our feelings on the situation are. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would think that, I have gay friends who may have at one point had a similar ick when they saw a heterosexual couple kissing. I don't know that that's the case. I don't know. Maybe it's not as strong. Maybe it's stronger. And I don't consider sexuality in general to be this kind of, off on or even straight by gay. It's
Right.
there's a whole spectrum.
I believe in the Kinsey scale. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, at least in principle. I mean, I think I'm way over on one side of the Kinsey scale, but I accept that people are all along the spectrum. Some are straight, some are gay, some are somewhere in between. I'd like to actually throw out a little bit of ACA history, though, because a number of years ago, the atheist community of Austin actually had a lot of argument over whether to create an official press release or proclamation basically saying we support gay rights. And the argument in favor of it, and I think I came out against it, but just barely. But the argument in favor of it was very persuasive, which is basically the argument was there really is no good reason for opposing homosexual equality except for religious ones. And therefore, it's completely in line for the atheist community of Austin to be announcing that we have an official position that it's okay to be gay.
As if our stamp of approval would make
Yeah, right. It would probably make them worse off if we said.
And that was one of the arguments that was discussed too, is whether or not gay rights movement would want a bunch of atheists who are potentially hated even more or less respected by certain members of the community, walking alongside them.
Right, but I'd also add that we have for years had a presence at the at the Austin Gay Pride Festival.
Still do every year.
Right. So we have a booth there, and we recruit people so they can not only be evil homosexuals but also evil godless people.
Yeah, and in general, I think Russell's right. There's not any kind of rationale for it that I can see. It's not an atheist issue, in that
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with atheism. But as he pointed out, I think there are religious aspects to it. Mainly, my purpose for supporting all this is in part because I have friends who are gay, because I recognize that this is something that I'd like to support, equality overall.
Right.
Because if I don't stand up for the rights of other people, I can't protect my own.
I have, I'd like to play devil's advocate for a second. I can remember having some email exchanges with people who were trying to justify their homophobia as atheists. And from what I recall, what they said was something like, well, it's not natural to be gay because Darwinian evolution says that, you have to have a male and a female to reproduce. And so if everybody was gay, the species would die out. And my reaction to that was, well, we don't have a problem with having too many babies.
Too few. Right.
We don't have a problem with having too few babies right now, so what's the problem? Anyway.
The argument's pretty much crap anyway. But
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. I think you have a great show.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks
Thanks a
Appreciate
lot.
the call.
Bye-bye.
I keep forgetting to ask people if they're going to care at all about the Super Bowl. I'm betting the answer for the
Somebody
most part
must.
is no.
Well,
but
if they were, they wouldn't be watching us.
is it Jason?
Yeah.
How you doing?
Oh, pretty good. I got two questions. The first one is, don't you think that the word atheism kind of marginalizes what it means to be rational? Because it gives people an easy way to dismiss not believing in God, because it's an ism. And the second question kind of dovetails into what you're talking about. People that are really religious always argue that you can't have morals without religion. Mm-hmm. But the follow argument to that is, well, you can't have all these atrocious morals without religion, like hating gays or like wanting to destroy another civilization because it doesn't fit with your religion. So there's a downside to that argument. Well, you can't have this innate belief without religion.
Right. I think Richard Dawkins says that it's just natural for people to, squabble over perceived differences. If I can see that if one guy is white and one guy is black, then that's something to identify themselves by. Dr. Seuss parodied that brilliantly with his Sneetches, where some have stars and some don't, and the ones with stars think they're better. And Richard Dawkins points out that religion is just kind of an artificial way to divide the world into us and them. I mean, you can't visually see what religion somebody is, so it's really imposing.
We lost Jason.
It's really imposing a completely unnecessary distinction between people in some ways.
Yeah, with regard to the first thing, does atheism carry with it significant baggage to kind of underplay rationalist views? Well, rationalism has a specific meaning in philosophy, and I don't think it necessarily applies to all atheists. And even naturalist doesn't, although I think it applies to much more. Yeah, there's baggage with the atheist label. I choose to use it for a couple of reasons. One is, even if somebody were to view it, atheist as equivalent to anti-theist, which it isn't necessarily, at least in that case, it's clear what it is that I'm opposed to. That it's not, just Catholic or Protestant or Muslim or whatever. That I'm actually opposed to this faith-based proposition that a God exists and that people can, hear what he wants them to do, and then they're going to dictate it to other people as well.
Right. I mean, if you were to go up to a Christian and say, "Hi, I'm not like you. I'm rational," the Christian would say, "Well, I'm rational too." I mean. I don't think that the rational. There's no word that's going to sugarcoat this in order to make it acceptable. We're talking about people who, in many cases, believe they have evidence. In other cases, believe they don't care who has evidence or doesn't have evidence. They've had some kind of personal revelation that makes it true, and they've got the infinitely wise creator of the universe on their side, and we're so clearly wrong that it doesn't matter what label we put on it. So when Sam Harris comes out and says, "Hey, maybe we should stop using this atheist label and pick up something like Brights," which I laugh at every time. I don't see where you're solving anything. It doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change what my beliefs are. It doesn't change what I feel that the problems are. So put whatever label you want on me. Call me an agnostic, call me an atheist, call me a materialist, a naturalist, a secular humanist, an evil, godless heathen. I don't care. I choose the atheist label for a couple of reasons. Number one, it promotes conversation with the people who I think conversations may actually be productive. And it discourages conversation with people with whom conversations are probably futile. If you tell somebody you're an atheist and they get that shocked sneer on their face, you know right away there's no point in having a conversation. But if actually, surprisingly, on those occasions when I've tried to cut off conversation with a religious person by saying I'm an atheist, I think generally they're more eager to talk to me.
Some of them are, but I mean that's the kind of response where, at least, and that's not the cold sneer that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
If they're eager to have a conversation, then they'll fall into the category of worthy of having a conversation.
Right. I mean, I remember that when I was in college, in college there's a lot of people lurking around campuses trying to hand tracts to you. And one time I said, "Sorry, I'm an atheist." And they said, "Oh, really? Why are you an atheist?" And the person wound up, I let them follow me around campus and continue the discussion. And we had an argument on my way to class. And it was interesting for both of us.
Yeah. I think that you can get a lot of conversations like that. That's one of the reasons why I tend to use the label. There is confusion. We even had somebody write in a nonprofit show yesterday asking us to clear this up. They have a friend who's an agnostic who says pretty much all the same stuff that we do. He just doesn't want to use the atheist label. Okay, fine. Use whatever label you're comfortable with. I'm comfortable with the atheist label in all kinds of ways. In general, theism is definitionally the belief in a God or belief in gods, and atheism becomes the lack of this belief. Not the belief in an opposite claim, which would be anti-theism. It's kind of like the difference between moral and amoral, and not moral and immoral. I don't know if that clears anything up for anybody else, but this whole agnostic atheist thing is one that we've actually discussed at Iron Chariots, where there's not necessarily a mutual exclusion.
Right. We've before we take this next call, I've noticed that the morality issue has come up, and I'd like to throw in something from what I was going to say before we get to the next one. I had a tendency to turn to my parents a lot for the big philosophical questions, partly because they were actually really good at answering them. And I've heard a stereotype of atheists that says, and this is kind of a side note, but I've heard a stereotype a lot that there's this pop psychology that says, oh, I know what atheists are. They're people who didn't get along with their fathers. And they're acting out some kind of hatred of their parents by pretending not to believe in God, or convincing themselves they don't believe in God. And of course, I always laugh when I hear that, because I have one of the best relationships with both my parents that I know of. Well, I remember when I was a preteen, I was reading a book that I think influenced my thinking a lot, not just because of what was in the book, but because of what the conversation I had with my dad later. I was a big fan of Lloyd Alexander when I was a kid, and he wrote a fantasy series called the Prydain series, which you may know from a Disney movie from the 80s called The Black Cauldron. They did a terrible job with it. But anyway, in the fourth book, the kid who's the center of the book kind of grows up, and it's called Taran Wanderer, and he goes around the world looking for his heritage. And he falls in with this wizard named Morda. And this guy is a really excellent villain. I mean, he's just completely contemptuous about the human race in general. He considers himself sort of out of their league, above, completely above them, superior in every way, and he doesn't have contact with them. And when occasionally somebody does stumble across where he lives, he doesn't think twice about doing something really nasty to them. And he gives this characteristic villainous speech where he talks about how pitiful and insignificant and also evil themselves the entire human race is. And reading this left me feeling very depressed. I mean, I suppose if I were raised religious, I might be able to think about this and say, nonsense, humans are created in the image of God, and God is good by definition, so I know that humans are good. Or, no, actually, Christians believe that humans are inherently evil. But
that being born is a sin.
But they're going to go to heaven, so some of them, and as long as you're a Christian, you're cool. I didn't have anything like that, and that speech was actually kind of persuasive to me. And I don't mean that I wanted to go be a villain, but I was like, man, I gotta think of some way to justify my existence. And I went to my dad and I asked, why, what's the point of doing all the stuff that we do in our lives? This villain in this story just made me think like everything in life is pathetic and a waste of time. And he said, no, look, life is basically a series of experiences that happens to you. And many of those are good experiences, and being alive is a better thing than not being alive. There are all kinds of wonderful things you can do. I mean, you enjoy fine meals and listen to great music and fall in love. And basically, the more experiences you have in life, the better. And so I think that if I can be an old man about to die, and I can look back in my life and be satisfied and think, yeah, I did some great stuff, then, then I've lived a good life by my own standards.
Yeah, one of the other issues with regard to morality, that kind of goes to value of life, but this claim that you can't have morality without, a God and God's little guidebook. The fact of the matter is that everybody goes about determining their morality in exactly the same way. You don't get to pretend that just because you have accepted this moral guidebook that you have done so because of divine authority. How do you tell the difference between things attributed to God and things attributed to the devil? I mean, if you read through, for example, the Christian Bible, there's plenty of things that are attributed to God, which I consider to be immoral, both in action and in deed, or in words. The truth of the matter is that you've gone through and you've read it and you've said, I judge this to be good. And then you've kind of taken the shortcut, and once you've made that decision, you presume that everything else in there is also good, which is just the lazy man's way of dealing with morality. And the honest truth is that everybody goes about doing it in exactly the same way.
And
Everybody
I can prove
determines,
it. We don't stone unruly teenagers to death. We just don't do it. And if you ask people, why don't you follow this law in the Old Testament? Then what they say is, well, that's the Old Testament, and God's law overrode that. But they don't say it overrode the Ten Commandments. So obviously there's some kind of standard going on which is not specifically mentioned in the Bible. Going through the Old Testament, there's a lot of stuff that might sound frankly barbaric, and I've heard people go through all kinds of good reasons to disregard them. But I mean, basically, it comes down to you've got a standard which isn't the Bible. You've got your own ideas about what's right and wrong, and when you read a passage like, Jesus saying, if you would be good, then sell all your belongings and go be a hermit, or whatever he said. Sell all your belongings and go give your money to the poor and spend the rest of your days being broke and doing good works. You are free to think, well, obviously Jesus didn't mean that for me, because you don't just take the Bible as your morality source.
The passages say what they say. No debate, no discussion. They say what they say. The difference is in the person, and it's the reason why you have thousands of different denominations of Christians. It's the reason why one person can look at this and say these things are immoral and these things are moral, and somebody else can disagree with them. I look at this and I say there are tons and tons of immoral things here. There are some morally good things in here. The difference is I don't need to accept any of this as an authority, because I recognize that the judgment in determining what's moral and immoral here comes from me. And as long as that's the case, I can chuck all of this and still keep, the things that I think are good and the things that I think are evil can be dismissed. But we got something that may actually kind of relate to this. Is it Maury?
Oh, yeah. Hi.
How you doing, Maury?
Just fine. I'm really enjoying your program there. I must start out to say that I am a Christian. But look, you guys have put the time, the effort, the energy, and it's obvious to me that you are very, you're solid in analyzing these things and so forth. And there's a million things I'd love to talk to you about. But
well, call in next week too. I mean, an email, and that's a good thing to remember. And also, and I'll let you get to this in just a second, I promise. But if I don't mention these things, I get beaten up after the show. We are going to dinner after the show at El Arroyo on 5th Street near Campbell. They'll put the address up on the screen. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us. The same is true for emailing tv@atheist-community.org. And you're welcome to call back in as often as you want. Now that I've cut Maury off, I'll let you get back to it.
Well, like I say, there's so many things that I could talk about, but one thing is that about the moral issue, and your compadre there described that pretty well. You can use reason and you can use logic and that sort of thing, but ultimately, then you would have to put this in the most succinct way I can. People that go out and commit horrible, terrible deeds, they can say that they're, hey, it's okay. Everything is okay.
They can say that, but
to themselves they can't.
But they don't. The thing is that ethics and morals didn't evolve in a vacuum. they're the product of a cooperative society. Basically, and you can look at this as in the simplest forms, is I'd rather not have my stuff stolen or be killed. And I found some other people who'd rather not have their stuff stolen or be killed. So we've gotten together and we've agreed that those things are bad. We're going to oppose them, and we're going to establish laws that deal with people who violate them. It doesn't matter if somebody comes along and kills somebody and then says, well, by my moral code, it's right. That's irrelevant. You're living in our society, and in order to do that, you need to abide by these rules. I'm not making a claim that there is some absolute intrinsic right, just because we all seem, most of us would instantly say that, beating a little child to death is morally wrong.
But how can you say morally wrong? It's wrong.
Okay, it's wrong. It's ethically wrong. I'm making the determination that it's wrong.
It's also socially wrong is part of the issue.
Well,
I read an interesting summary of Eastern morality versus Western morality in sort of a philosophy book one time. It was in the form of a dialogue where somebody whose title is moralist comes up to a guy who's a Taoist, and the moralist says, I believe that there are absolute standards of right and wrong. The Taoist says, yeah, me too. The moralist says, okay, what is your highest moral principle? And the Taoist says, everybody has the right to do whatever they want. So the moralist says, that's horrible. Does that mean that somebody has the right to kill somebody else? And the Taoist says, well, yeah, the guy has the right to kill somebody, and then the police have the right to come and arrest them, and the judge has the right to sentence him to death.
I see. Yeah.
When I look at this in kind of in terms that the moral issue comes up quite a bit. When I mentioned before that we may all instinctively almost come to the conclusion that killing is wrong. You don't have to think too much about it, not because there's some divine absolute moral authority that's written the code in our hearts. It's because everybody, by virtue of being alive, has an understanding of the value of that life and why they don't want it lost. Now, I happen to believe that in some sense, there is an absolute moral truth. And I got this primarily after discussion with Dennis Lubay, who hosts the nonprofit show with us. We talked about this quite a bit, and I agree with him. In the pantheon of possible actions one could take for any given situation, some are better and some are worse, which means some of them are either the best possible action, and I'm not oversimplifying it. It may be best for the individual, it may be best for society, but somewhere when we go through and we make the valuation of how to weight these things, some of these actions come out at the high end of the scale. They would be either the moral absolutes or as close as we can ever possibly come. And I think that what we're doing as a society is constantly growing and evolving our morals hopefully towards that that better outcome, that more absolute truth. And I think that this is nowhere any clearer than when we look at the history of religions in particular, Christianity specifically. There have been plenty of things even 50 or 100 years ago that preachers and the Bible would say were morally correct or not morally wrong, and yet we oppose them. And that could be anything from short skirts to slavery.
Well, I'm sure you've heard, the saying that Christians are not perfect, and that's why they go to church, right?
Yes.
And
no, hang on. Christians, their book supports slavery, tells you exactly how much to pay for slaves, how to treat them, how to drive a spike through their ear in order to mark them, how to give them a bride that they'll fall in love with so that when it's time to let them go free, you get to trap them.
I know. I've read Leviticus. I mean, you have to, stone people to death.
It's not just Leviticus. Jesus advocates slaves obeying their masters as well. You show me one point where Jesus comes out and says slavery, the owning of another human being, is morally incorrect. He never says it.
Okay. Give me a sec.
Okay.
There is one Christian sect that would even say that somebody that is engaging and is thoughtful, and I'm not flattering you. There's a difference between compliment and flattery. I'm not flattering you. I am complimenting you.
I understand.
Okay, good. That even a person from that corner can, have Christ and go to God. But one thing that you cannot answer, and I've tried myself, is your very existence. Where did it come from?
It came from my parents.
From your parents. Hey, come on.
I can show you my parents. Well, actually, you probably can't because they won't come on the show.
Why? Where did your parents come from? And
Their
so on?
parents. Yeah. Hey, can I ask you a question?
Look, all I want to do.
Where'd God come from?
Just finish, and then I'll let you go. Okay. You guys are tremendous. I'm trying to.
I'm trying to lose some, though.
No,
I'm trying to lose some weight.
It's true. It's true. And I think that you're maybe veering off in a little bit of the wrong direction. But I think you're going to be okay. That's my point. Now, go ahead and answer your existence question.
Before we do that, I mean, okay, the whole veering off in a wrong direction. I mean, we're coming from two completely different directions. Russell was raised an atheist. I was raised Southern Baptist and was even studying to be a minister before I became an atheist. My question is, you're asking about to explain our origins. Let's assume, and I'm not saying that I can't, let's assume for a second that we have no explanation of origins. What justifies this outlandish claim that a God did it? If we have no better explanation, what makes that one win out?
I can't say.
Okay, so now, and I'm not just saying this as a cop-out. If there's no good reason to actually justify that God did it one, and we're in a position where we have no better explanation, then the correct answer is we don't know what our origins are. It's not I'm justified in believing that Magic Man done it. It's I'm not justified in believing anything. When we talk about
like Christopher Hitchens, he says he can't explain certain things. I mean they're unexplainable.
I agree.
That's true.
There are certain things that we are incapable of explaining. We do have a good understanding of human origins, of the evolution of life. We have less of an understanding with regard to abiogenesis, but we do have good examples of how abiogenesis can happen by purely natural means, and we have a good cosmology back to the Big Bang.
Okay, I think you're about ready to go off here. So can I just squeeze this in?
Sure.
Okay. Look, your questions and your position is obvious and it's very clear and it's very rational and everything like that. But I think that you just take it a step further. That's all I'm saying.
How so? I really, now, don't get me wrong, I really want to understand this because I know a lot of people, like my brother, by the way, is a perfectly, eminently reasonable person who's also a Christian. And in general, we've tried to have a couple discussions about it. We tend to leave it alone. And to him, he says things that are similar to what you're saying, that yes, the points are rational and justified, but there's something in him that just can't stop believing in this God no matter how ridiculous it may appear on the face.
That goes back to the sect, and I don't want to mention that sect because then it's going to look like I'm promoting that, and I don't want to promote that. But there is one that does recognize all of these things that you stated, and it's a more 19th century one, but anyway,
I'm just asking what okay. My only concern is the truth. I actually care whether or not my beliefs are true or likely to be true. I'd prefer to believe as hang on. I'd prefer to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. So what I need to do is develop a way of determining which things are most likely true, which things are least likely true, so that my thoughts are at the least risk of believing false things. So when you say that there's some justification for the belief in a God, I just want to know what it is.
It's your ability to love, to touch.
How is that proof of a God? The existence of something is not proof of its cause.
God is just short for good.
Oh, well, okay, then we agree. All right, then I believe in God now, because I believe that there are ways to judge for yourself whether things are good or bad. So if God is just another word for good, then I believe in God.
However, if your claim is that God is just good, why the hell did you start with this explain your origins? Because goodness is not an explanation for origins.
No, the issue is that he needs soldiers.
Who's a he? Good is not a he. Good isn't a he. Good isn't an entity.
As far as we know, good doesn't have a penis. I mean, you can't...
You can't say that God equals good and then go right back to personification.
And anthropomorphize it.
Penis is just a euphemistic term.
Okay, so you really didn't mean that it was good. You were just trying to avoid the question that I asked when I asked what reason was there for believing it.
No. God has to have troops. He has to have soldiers. He has to have people that are going to follow him and do his deeds and do the good. We don't go to heaven.
How do you know any of that?
Let me finish, please.
No, not please. I asked a question that you can't answer, and you come back with something that's even more outlandish, that God needs soldiers. If you won't answer the first question about why you believe that God exists, at least answer what makes you think that God needs soldiers.
Okay, because he's needy.
How do you know this?
Because he's my father. And my...
Really? Can we call him?
Sure, my father needed things. He needed to clothe his children. He needed this and that. And he needs people.
As needy as we are for calls on Super Bowl Sunday, and as much as I appreciated a lot of things you had to say early on, and I think there may be some great discussions afterwards, you're doing nothing but continuing to duck the questions and then making more assertions that are even more outlandish. So on that note, I'm going to let you go, and we're going to go on to another caller. But if you come up with a better point or something that answers the question, not just the reason why you believe, but the reason why you think somebody else should, or why this should be. I mean, we're talking about shared truth here. You come up with that, feel free to give us a call back this week, next week, email, whatever. But yeah, we can't keep asking questions and have people dodging and ducking like that.
And as needy as we are for calls this week, if God does want to call into the show and say hi, and
although we're likely to have James
welcome.
calling in to pretend that he's God.
Right, or that guy from Real Genius.
Well, see, here's somebody who says he can tell us why there's a God. Is it Charles?
I am God.
Are you?
Charles, hi, God.
You know, you really could get a call from God. I'm just sitting here kidding, but boy, wouldn't you be shocked. Tell me why you think there is no God, and then I'll tell you why I think there is a God.
Do you believe in leprechauns?
No.
Why not?
There is no documentation that's 2,000 years old that has withstood the test of time.
So you think a belief is justifiable just because there's ancient books that talk about it? So how do you disregard?
I guess you would be willing to believe in, like, what are some of those things in the Odyssey?
Well, that's what I was saying.
What I'm asking you is why do you feel so firm there is no God? Is it just simply because nobody's ever shown you that there is?
Okay, there's two things, and I'll address both of them. First of all, atheism is the lack of a belief. However, I do go farther than that, and I actually believe that there is no God, so I can answer your question. The reason I believe there is no God is the same reason that I don't believe that there's a tooth fairy or anybody else, because there's or leprechauns and pixies and blah blah blah. Because I haven't been shown sufficient evidence to justify that belief. The bigger claim is, the bigger the evidence needs to be to support it.
Okay. Do you believe in black holes?
Yes.
Would you have believed in black holes 20 or 30 years ago?
I probably wouldn't have.
30 years ago, I would have been 3. So
well, you get my point.
75 or 100 years ago.
Black holes because scientists are discovering things that indicate that they really exist.
Right. And the time to believe something is when the evidence exists to justify it. Just because we've demonstrated the existence of black holes doesn't mean that the original hypothesis was justifiably believable at the time.
Well,
if later on, if somebody proves that there's a God, well, of course I'll believe then. I'm not thick.
Well, listen, God is being proved more and more every day with archaeologists and what they're finding. And
Really?
That's weird, because
wait a minute. The thing about it, too, is your reasons for not seeing proof in God are gradually going away.
No, they're not. And
As a matter of fact, just the opposite. A lot fewer people believe in God now that so many scientific discoveries have been made than used to believe. I mean, like
that's
a couple
totally
hundred
incorrect.
years
There
ago,
are
you
more
had
people
nearly
believe in God
universal.
today.
no, actually,
A couple
there's
hundred
not.
years ago,
The
you
largest,
had nearly universal belief in God.
the largest growing category of religions is those that are none. None of the above. That's the largest growing category.
Yeah.
Christianity in the United States is on decline, as are nearly every other religion. Actually, Islam is growing in America, and Christianity is in decline. But general God belief is on the decline, and every reliable
not just
statistic
to
shows.
restrict
Well,
it to the
wait
general
a second. You
population.
just
I mean, if we
contradicted
talk-
yourself.
How?
Islam believes in God.
Yes, the rate of the Islam is growing, but the total of God believers is shrinking.
You really think?
I know.
Now,
We've-
we're going to have to agree to disagree on that. But
Yeah, because
listen,
one of us has actually gone and looked at the frickin' data, and the other one's just making wild assertions.
I tell you what, refer me to it, and I'll go look at it. Can I get to it online?
Sure, you can go look at any study of religiosity over the last 10 years. Any of them. Go to adherence.com, I think, is one of them.
Say that again.
Org. Adherence.
It's either adherence.com or adherence.org.
ADHERENTS.
Okay.
Go to look at any
I'll-
peer-reviewed study of religiosity in the United States, and you will see that God belief is on the decline and has been for a decade or more.
Okay.
And
you
not
can-
just in the general population, but I mean, if you go to scientists, it's certainly true that many scientists believe in God. But the rate of believing in God among educated people and people who have studied science, the more education they have, the fewer percentage-wise actually believe in God.
And I've just been told it's .com.
What percentage of Americans claim today that they believe in God?
About 80.
It's roughly around 80 to 85.
Listen, that's a lot of people.
I know, and you know what?
The majority.
It
And
doesn't.
you guys are sitting up there bashing it because more people are disbelieving in it.
No, I didn't.
I'll go with 85% any day. and I
So
agree with you on that figure.
your only criterion for determining whether or not a God exists is whether or not most people believe so?
If 85% of people jumped off a bridge,
Listen, I have
sorry.
been in hospital rooms and seen people believe on their deathbeds.
I've
Okay,
seen
me
people
too.
believe too.
Okay, I have been.
And what does that prove?
I have been.
I'll tell you what
in-
it proves. It proves that when people get really close to death, some of them get crazy and scared and are willing to reach out for anything. It is not any remotely a testament to the truth of the claims, and neither is whether or not 80 to 85% believe it. At one time, everybody believed the earth was flat. The Bible says that there's a firmament. It
There's
talks
four
about a
corners
literal
of the
flood,
earth.
the four corners of the earth. All of these things, people genuinely believe it. I have no doubt, and never would I claim that people don't believe and don't believe genuinely. I think they do, and 80 to 85% of them believe in a God. I don't believe that that belief's justified. When we started this off, you asked about black holes, and I pointed out that the time to believe something, any claim, is when there's evidence to actually support it. I'm asking, what is the evidence? And I'm not going to be persuaded by 85% of people think so. Well, you know what? That doesn't matter. What matters is evidence, and this is a huge claim. This isn't just 85% of the people believe that red cars are prettier than blue cars.
Right.
This is a claim about a transcendent, intelligent creator of the universe who answers prayer and fiddles with things and knew all of this. I mean, that's huge. And you're going to do, 85% of people believe it's good enough. It's good enough for Mama. It's good enough for me.
It doesn't matter the fact that they do believe it. What matters is what reason do they have for believing it. I mean, everybody in the world could believe something, and it could still be an error.
Can you put me back on?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, listen, both of you guys are wearing clothes. Why? If you don't follow trend, I mean, what percentage of Americans believe that you should wear clothes?
Are you saying that whether or not we wear clothes is
You're
an
wearing
equivalent?
clothes
Would you
because
let me finish?
Yes.
Would you say that whether or not we decide to wear clothes is an equivalent claim to whether or not we believe in a God?
No, but it's
Then why bring it up?
it's proof positive that you go along with the crowd.
No, actually, it's proof positive that it's a requirement of law that if I go on television, I got to have clothes on.
You're wearing, and okay, I got you.
I wear them the rest of the time because they keep me warm, because they're comfortable, because it is a trend.
And even
even
I
those
like
trends,
not being arrested.
yes, and because I don't like running around naked. But none of that has anything to do with any kind of claim about the existence of God.
Okay, I want to give you a couple of other examples.
Okay.
I'm a Vietnam vet, and I've seen people risking their lives every day where they could die at any time.
You mean like Pat Tillman, the atheist?
No, like many Americans. You know, if you look now at the veterans, at the soldiers that are serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, believe me, those people believe in God.
No, not all of
I
us
just
do,
hung up on you.
because-
I just hung up on you, and if you're still listening, I'll tell you why. Because I'm sick to death of this stupid claim about no atheists in foxholes. First of all, I've already said that no matter how many people believe it, that's irrelevant to the truth or irrelevant to why anybody else should do it. But you don't get to come on here and use the troops that are over there dying, people like Pat Tillman, who are atheists serving in foxholes, ACA members who are atheists over there serving their country, over there fighting in, I don't know, wars based on lies. You don't get to use the cheap card and try to claim that there's some good justification for that. I don't care how many people believe it.
We get email from soldiers in Iraq at least like once a month, right? Wouldn't you say?
Easily.
Saying.
And as a veteran myself, I'm offended and sickened that you would even stoop to try and do that. So you don't get to talk anymore today. Enjoy the Super Bowl. Anyway, we got Howard, is it?
Yeah, I'm over here.
How you doing, Howard?
They mute you. All right.
You're where?
Do you have
Yeah.
to turn us off on the TV?
Oh, okay.
Good move.
So that was great. I'm really glad you hung up on that guy there at the end.
I am too. Actually,
that's-
I'm not. I wish we could have had a...
Same thing. I say, how dare he bring that up? You know, it's like, I'm sure that amongst the armed forces, there's the same representation of atheists as there is in the general community. And I'll tell you that 85%, I bet you about 15 minutes of discussion with somebody who says they believe in God, you can pretty much get them to say, no, not exactly. No, I don't really believe that stuff.
Yeah,
And, you know,
and who knows,
they say
maybe
it's a
85%
cultural
might...
thing. I'm an atheist. I've been basically, since I was a little kid, I grew up in Brooklyn. I was raised kind of Jewish, not real Jewish, but I remember walking down the street there where there were churches, there were Protestant churches, Catholic churches, synagogues, lined up. And the thing is, I said, okay, so, you know, you're in a family, and they tell you you go with this one, and you're a Catholic, you're a Protestant, you're a Jew, whatever it is. You walk down the street, you pick, you know, you've got your thing. You know, if you're a Catholic, you walk past the big statue of Jesus and you cross yourself and stuff, and that's all, you know. And nobody in America, nobody gives you any shit about it, and that's been the beauty of the country, pretty much, until here recently, when the bully Christians have suddenly decided that not only did they get rewarded in this lifetime, they get to tell everybody else how to live their lives. And that, to me, is unpatriotic, downright traitorous. And I think that the horrible situation our country is in right now is the direct result of these people having way too much influence in the whole social scheme that we have in this country. So, you know, I'll put that forward. And then as far as morality goes, whenever I talk to somebody who's a Christian who thinks they get their morality from the Bible and that it comes from God, I tell them there is no God. All that stuff was man-made. A few women got to chip in every once in a while, but it's mostly all man-made.
They got to chip in early until the men took over.
All the stuff where we think you shouldn't kill anybody except look at the fine print, or you can kill a whole bunch of people. You know, all that stuff, it's all relative. They talk about moral relativism. Well, it's all relative.
Well, it's absurd to think that man was alive for I don't know how many years before God decided to lay down the rules that were essential. I mean, it's a whole bunch of just silliness in there. But I actually wish that
the absurdity of it just goes, that you can just turn one thing over after another, and you see these people squirm. Like the guy right before the last caller, where all of a sudden he started talking about all this, goodness, that God is goodness, and all this stuff. And it's like, the thing is, it's a cultural thing. Here, our language itself is inadequate to even have a decent discussion about what it's really all about, because our language, for instance, being an atheist, it's an anti-thing.
I'm not so sure. I've actually made that same point before, and I'm not so sure that I disagree with it. I think there are limitations, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that our language is incapable of having these. We can. What we need to do is stop talking at cross purposes. The last caller, I'm disappointed that I ended up hanging up and having to, based on my own feelings on the matter. But I can tell already from having done the show for years, there's no way to reach any kind of consensus or understanding between the two of us. The caller prior to that, where we were actually having a good discussion, and I can understand his reluctance or inability to answer direct questions about what's the justification for not only for your belief in God, but why somebody else should as well.
Right.
Usually,
because after a while, it just becomes absolutely ridiculous.
Well, usually the
theologists, and the guy has to start having these really absurd. There's the second guy that talked about, well, how come you're wearing clothes then?
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
Usually the theologists just go with its faith thing. It requires
it has nothing to do with it, And there are, it's like we are part of this culture. We have to. I think that there's actually a lot more atheists, and I think what's happening right now, because of the technological advances over the last 150 years, where we've just made these incredible strides, and our abilities to deal with each other as humans really hasn't made that much progress. Just a little bit of progress. And the United States, as an example, like our Constitution is a fine example, the Bill of Rights, fine examples of human progress. And it's conspicuous by the absence of any mention of Jesus Christ. All our founding documents,
Yeah.
But yet people keep wanting to pull it back. It's like Al Pacino in The Godfather. They keep sucking us back in, sucking us back down the hole of this stupid stuff. Just like it's really extreme over in the Mideast, where they really kill each other about it. Over here, it's just it seems like it's under the surface again, and it's really a horrible, scary thing. Especially since they're also a bunch of gun nuts too. So.
I try to be optimistic, and I basically think that religious extremism goes in cycles.
I didn't hang up. We're getting noise on your phone.
Noise, yeah. Religious extremism goes in cycles, and we happen to be on a really bad downswing at the moment. But I also think that there's evidence that we've hit the low peak.
I actually
and
think
it swing back the other way. And I think on the whole, if you were to graph the amount of religious intolerance in the world, if there was an actual numerical scale you could use, it would look something like, up and down and up and down. But wait a minute. Tolerance, the good way. It's going up is good.
Okay.
We're getting more tolerant over time, but it's swinging back and forth.
Even if it's a deist. Even if you say you're a deist or something like that, where you're like maybe what you were saying about your mother, where she sort of got the New Age kind of thing, and it's sort of maybe a Gaia thing or some kind of spiritual thing, where the universe has some sort of consciousness overall.
Yeah, she talks about a spiritual internet, which I think is kind of cool.
With the idea that we have no purpose, but obviously we can do lots of really cool stuff, and the world is a wonderful place to experience. So we should just do it and try to be good to each other. And that seems to be, the nutshell of the Bible, which is do unto others as you have them do unto you. I used to teach Hebrew school years ago. That's the essence of it. And then all these religions, all of them, are just one excuse after another for not doing that.
Well, we got one more caller I want to get to before we get off the air, so I'm going to let you go after that.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah, the doing other thing is the nutshell of the Bible, only if you're very selective about how you go about picking your nutshell.
Right.
It's mentioned twice and yet there's all this other stuff in there that's bad advice and
And
immoral.
also, it's not original to the Bible. I mean, if you Google the Golden Rule history or
Ethic
something
of
like
reciprocity.
that, you'll find that it shows up all over the place before Jesus co-opted it. Christians like to say that he used slightly different language because he said "do unto others" instead of "do not do unto others." But it's really
And actually, I think his is one of the worst
opinions.
because he says, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you."
Right.
And some people aren't going to want to be treated the way that you want to be treated. So I think a better one is do unto others as they would have you do unto them.
Right. It's like, I really like to eat nuts, but I wouldn't make a person who is allergic to nuts.
I won't be making any comment.
Yeah. Double entendre, none in there.
We've got Ivy. How you doing?
Yes, I would like to tell you my experience.
Okay.
My dad, I grew up in London, England, and my daddy was an atheist, and my mother used to send me to church. So I was sort of, mixed up half and half. And I married an American when I was 17, and I was getting ready to come to America, and this is what my daddy said to me. He said, "I love you more than anybody else in the whole world. I know I'm going to die before you, and when I do, if I can at all, if it's possible, I will come to you." Well, I was pretty horrified. I was just a young kid. I wasn't thinking about death. So I came to America, and about 8 years later, this was 1958, I got news that my daddy was dead, and I thought, oh my God, I didn't have the money to go home. And I thought, well, he's going to come to me some way. But he never did. Never did. Never came to me anyway. And I knew that if he could have, he would have. And so I'm an atheist, definitely. I went through the war in London with all the bombing. I was just a kid, and I used to pray, and I'd say, God, if you're there, do something. This is awful. Well, of course, he wasn't there because he doesn't exist. That's my experience.
I happen to agree, and thanks a lot for calling and sharing that.
That was a very moving story, and I'm, of course, sorry for your loss, as I'm sorry for anybody who loses a loved one.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Thanks, Ivy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. There's and I guess, we only got like 2.5 minutes left or
Right, I
whatever.
could probably wrap something
So
up
why don't you
at that point.
wrap up while we're talking about family?
But I mean, in general, I don't know atheists to be particularly closed-minded about things, and that's why I say that I don't think I was indoctrinated in the same sense that we talk of people being indoctrinated into other religions. I think my parents never really disguised who they were or what they believed. They told me things openly, but they never said, if you turn out to be a Christian, then so help me, I'll disown you.
Yeah.
I think they were always very accepting of any choice that I might make, and I, like the caller, went through a period when I said to myself, well, what if I'm wrong? I mean, I've never been unwilling to consider that scenario. I've prayed for things, and like George Carlin says, I get them about the same 50-50 rate no matter who I pray to.
Yeah.
I've gone to church one time with Matt. I've gone to temple a whole lot. I've always been willing to listen to religious people's arguments. On the whole, I recommend growing up atheists if you can arrange to do that. And I love my parents, and I think, it takes all kinds of atheists. I guess that's all I can say.
With regard to being, open-minded or open to everything, I just had a conversation with my mom a couple of weeks ago, and, I explained to her, this isn't a matter of me being closed-minded or anything. I'm open to evidence. I'm open to reason. If you can make a good, really sound argument that a God exists, I'll believe. I'm open to evidence. I'm open to all these things, but what I'm not open to is emotional appeals to popularity. I don't care if 85% believe it. Anything that contains an obvious logical fallacy. I'm the only one of the two of us that's demonstrated that he's capable of changing his mind about big issues like this. And that's when my mom admitted that they are closed-minded. They accept the Bible, that settles it for them, and that's where we ended the conversation. Love my parents, we're not going to agree on this, but that's the way things go. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks to the crew you just saw listed on the screen who don't have time. Join us at El Arroyo on 5th Street, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Ben, for being good through the show.
You're welcome.